Well, a U.S. judge temporarily blocked the Trump administration from revoking Harvard University's ability to enroll foreign students, a policy the Ivy League school called part of President Donald Trump's broader effort to retaliate against it for refusing to surrender its academic independence. The other opens new tab, provides temporary relief to thousands of international students who were faced with being forced to transfer under a policy that the Cambridge Massachusetts-based university called a blatant violation of the U.S. Constitution and other federal laws, and said would have an immediate and devastating effect on the university and more than 7,000 visa holders. Well, joining us from London is Arise International Affairs analyst Dr. Laskiewicz to discuss the continued attacks by Russia, the completion of prisoner swap, King Charles III's visit to Canada, plus Harvard's standing up against Trump, if you like. Well, good to have you, Marek. Russia has continued with the bombardment, as you know, of Ukraine despite efforts from Trump and the EU. What message is Putin trying to convey to the US and the world?
It's quite simple. Putin is fighting on until he gets the terms of a treaty, if you like, that he wants. And in the meantime, he would like to seize more territory. In lieu of that, at the very least, carrying on bombing Ukraine with an attempt to break the spirit so they'll agree to the terms which he's sending over shortly.
We also say Putin is doing this because he has other major world leaders behind him.
I think Putin must act in that way because having started the war, he must bring it to a successful climax. A autocrat, which is de facto what President Putin is, can only stay in power if he is successful, and therefore he cannot afford to lose.
Now, Zelensky says the U.S.'s silence is encouraging Russia. Can a meeting between the two leaders, that's the U.S. and Russia, change anything? I mean, Zelensky is just helpless, and this solidifies the U.S.'s lack of power, the EU's lack of power in all of this.
Yes, as you say, the EU is next to impotent. It's not very important. The key player is President Donald Trump, and we've no idea quite what he wants. I think he's waiting to see precisely what terms the Russians are going to offer to come to a treaty, which they'll find out soon. And for that reason, he's staying silent, simply not to prejudice the issue. As for what Donald Trump actually wants, as far as one can tell, is an end to the war and resumption of business with Russia and, of course, Ukraine. But this is unlikely to happen in the near future, as the Russian terms almost certainly will be unacceptable to President Zelensky, just as President Zelensky's terms are unacceptable to Russia.
Indeed. But one question in mind as well is we keep talking about, what the Russia can, succumb to. What do you think Putin can, succumb to? And that's one question on one hand. On the other hand, there are terms he intends to send to Ukraine, to continue the peace talks. One wonders what those terms are or could be.
As for the terms he has in mind, he's made this clear quite often in the past. Essentially, everything he's conquered and a bit more besides, down there in eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine, he wants to keep his de jure. That is to say, recognized internationally, not merely de facto that he has occupied them. Secondly, he wants Ukraine not to join NATO and there be no Western troops. And thirdly, having had this success, President Putin wants obviously to carry on. In my books, what I suggested was that President Putin would go from one war to another on the basis that he is actually looking to restore Russia's full role as a superpower. And this is third option, as third aspect, which is the most worrying. As for what could stop him, well, the problem is that although you could send even more arms, if one doesn't watch out, the war will escalate. This is what worried President Biden, and President Trump has no intention of doing that. In fact, he condemned some of the weapons being sent. The sanctions, well, again, there's this news or this point that's been made that there are crippling sanctions USA could bring about on Russia. It's unclear whether this is the case because Russia is a huge country with huge resources and has many allies and semi-allies. So it's unclear that sanctions would do this. In short, there's very little that can be done to stop President Putin short of escalating the war by sending more troops and especially arms to Ukraine.
Now, fingers crossed. Let's see how that pans out. But may the source of those who died rest in peace. Now to King Charles III's invitation to Canada. How significant is this?
Yes, in your preamble, you stated that the Canadians had taken a different path. Canada retained dominion status after achieving this in the 19th century as a direct result, really, of the Americans achieving their independence, which means they're fully autonomous in every respect apart from the nominal figure of King Charles, which is part of this Commonwealth. However, King Charles has representatives, as you put in, the Governor General to act as part. Bringing him over simply reinforces the difference between Canada and the USA, between their having this monarch and America having no monarch. And therefore, it is a PR exercise to ensure and to point out to America, Canada does not want to be the 50-something state of USA. And in that respect, that's what it really is, a gigantic PR exercise.
So, but then that's the strongest message so far to Trump and the world, talking about not joining the United States. But let's move to other issues. That leads me to the Harvard situation. Now, Harvard, among 60 other universities, is standing up against the White House. How impactful is this move by the Trump administration?
Well, the Trump administration can certainly press and do a great deal. It's not been done ever before. But the Trump administration has many financial and legal inducements to make the universities toe the line. The universities can, of course, try and hold up by using the law. But the law in the USA is not quite like the law, say, in Great Britain, where famously said that be you ever so high, the law is ever above you. This is by Lord Denning. There's nothing like that in USA. The president can, to a vast degree, override, continue to act, with the law being little more than a hindrance. It is actually the question of whether the Senate and, in other words, the entire parliamentary aspect of USA, they could stop Trump. But of course, Trump has majorities and many people to support him. And in the absence of that, the universities, just with the law on their side, will find it's an uphill struggle. And in any case, some universities probably will drop out, finding the struggle pointless. So therefore, we're in for an interesting time. The universities have the work cut out to retain their independence unless and until America's various congressmen and senators decide otherwise.
The Trump administration also complained about, anti-Semitism. How is this the best way to handle anti-Semitism and, independence or surrendering independence to the United States?
Well, one of the problems is, when discussing this issue, is it hinges a great deal also on Israel's behavior. So therefore, it depends how you define people who do not agree with Israel's approach. Insofar as there are any murders take place as recently, that is absolutely unacceptable. But insofar as people are expressing their views that they do not support Israel's actions, that is clearly possible and legal on the freedom of speech. And it would appear that President Trump has decided even the secondary aspect, which I've referred to, is unacceptable. And hence, he is actually trying to punish or at least control the universities. And it is this aspect which is the most worrying. Also, it is not clear that President Trump is a supporter of academic freedom or academia in any way. He strikes one as a person who has a chip on his shoulder about many things, the media being one and the universities as well, because they're left-wing and so oppose his policies. Therefore, in the immediate future, there will be more disputes between universities and the White House, and anti-Semitism and how far any sort of protest can be taken will be a key aspect of this.
Now, on a lighter note, Marek, it seems like, from your explanation and from a lot of experts out there, international analysts, it seems like Trump's hand is literally everywhere, economy to education to health. Isn't it too many things happening at the same time?
Well, it is indeed quite interesting. He's done an awful lot in his first 100 and 200 days. It'll be recalled that JFK, that's Kennedy, of course, did a lot in his 100, but Trump has clearly spent his 4 years planning what he wants to do and is trying to implement all these policies. When you say there are a lot, it is because he's actually pre-planned his entire presidency. He's trying to implement. But the problem is, of course, it's not going as smoothly as he had hoped, which is why not only is it a bumpy ride, but he's not realizing his plans as quickly as possible, which is why we're still in the time of change, because many people are opposing the change. Therefore, it may seem to be a lot, but not if you consider he's had 4 years to prepare this plan.
Thank you so much for that very diplomatic response. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Marek.